This Sony ZVE1 is capable of some pretty incredible video footage, but come here. The way the buttons are set up when you first take it out of the box could be so much more efficient. I'm used to something like the Sony A7 IV that has a lot more buttons and dials, and you can make this thing really fast to navigate what you need. The good news is that I've spent hours with the ZVE1 obsessed over how do I make this thing ridiculously efficient, customizing every single button, every single setting, and I'm gonna teach that to you today. As we get into this, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have your ZVE1 set in manual video mode. To change that, just make sure that this switch is in video mode, which is notated by the video camera icon. Then swipe left or right on the screen, tap this shoot mode icon and change it to the M for manual. And look, if you're intimidated by manual mode and you prefer to stay in intelligent auto, that's cool. Just know I have a lot of videos planned for this channel to help you be a lot more comfortable with manual shooting, as it's gonna give you a lot more flexibility. But if you wanna stay in intelligent auto, you're gonna learn something in this video, but not every single thing is gonna be directly applicable. The first thing we're gonna look at to customize this camera is going to be the touch sidebar menu. To access this, just swipe left or right on the camera screen. At the time of making this video, this menu is not customizable. Hopefully we get that in some kind of firmware update, but as of right now, it's not customizable. I'm gonna run you through what I find to be the most valuable settings here, the ones that I'm gonna use in every single video shoot. I'm gonna skip some, so if I don't talk about them, it's because I don't use them. This icon is how we select what's called our shoot mode. We're about to jump into a fairly dense topic, so get your notepads out. We're coming in hot. I'm gonna make this simple for you. We're talking about memory recall. So once you tap the shoot mode here, you're gonna be met with this menu. We talked about this earlier and we set the camera to M mode, but if you notice down below, there's MR. Right now this is MR1. MR stands for memory recall, and that same video camera icon suggests that this is for video because the camera from earlier is set in the video mode. And then if you scroll to the right on this, you're gonna see those three containers. 1, 2, and 3. What do those mean? We can go through the camera. This is a huge efficiency hack. This is big. We can go through the camera, set everything. Our shutter speed, our aperture, our ISO, our LUT or picture profile, our white balance, even our autofocus speeds. We can change literally everything, and then we can save it to a container. So for me, I'm gonna show you exactly how I have every single one of my containers set up, because I think it's gonna help you. But just know that you can default these to what you want them to be. How to default them is back here in the menu. I'm gonna go over to tab 3, and I'm gonna go down to number 4, MR camera set memory. After you've set everything up the way that you want to, when you click on this and you choose one of the containers, it's going to register it to that space. It looks like this when you register. It's just gonna say registered, simple. Let me explain to you exactly how and why I've set up the bins the way that I have them. So in number 1, what I use number 1 for is a studio style shot. So a studio locked off talking head style shot. This is my YouTube. This is anything for a interview where I know I have controlled lighting. I'll talk about white balance in a second. Let me scroll through and show you why I have things the way that I have them. On screen here you can see a few things. We're in manual mode in the upper left. My autofocus is on continuous. Shutter speed is 1/50. I've got my aperture as low as the lens will go. ISO is at 640, which is the lowest ISO setting for S-Log3, which this one is in. I'm in XAVC-S 4K 24p 100 meg 422 10-bit color. On the right, my white balance is locked at 5600. Autofocus is on, soft skin is off, and that user 1 down there, that's a LUT that I have installed on the camera for S-Log3. I'm gonna scroll through, I can push down here and you can actually see every single setting that I have adjusted here and saved to my memory recall 1. I'm not gonna go through all these, there's a lot, but I'll tell you the important ones. So on here, all that I have is I have my log shooting as set to on. That's because I've installed a user LUT onto the camera. Color gamut is the one that we use for S-Log3. There's no embedded LUT file. I'm not using proxy recording. I'm not going to talk about any of this, but you can customize a ton. And just to reiterate, you don't customize them in this menu. You go into the actual menu, make your customizations, and then save it to one of the containers, and it's just reflecting what you saved. There's nothing in here that's worth talking about. Nothing in here that's, well, actually that's not true. My audio record level, I had it set to 19, just something kind of high. I have the camera recording audio, you usually have some kind of microphone. In a situation like this is just a scratch track, so make sure the audio is turned up pretty high. And moving through here, there's a few tabs that are not worth talking about here. Again, you can customize a lot on these, but another thing that I have in my memory recall number 1 is I have my zebra display auto set to on and my zebra level auto set to level 70. We're definitely going to talk about those in the custom buttons in a little bit. Autofocus transition speed and autofocus subject shift sensitivity, I have those set as low as possible. That's because for a talking head style shot, I want the autofocus to stick and I don't want to have it hunting around or pulsing around too much. For slow motion, I'd probably turn that up a little bit. And these rest of these tabs are not super important. Let's look at my memory recall number 2. We'll go through that a little bit faster. Okay, so in memory recall number 2, this is going to be my slow motion. So I have this set, you can see XAVCS 4K 60p at 422 10-bit, which is our slow motion codecs and frame rates. And then on my shutter speed, I have that defaulted to 1/125 to double my frame rate being at 60. I want my shutter speed to always be double my frame rate. So you can just see if I'm shooting a regular talking head shot, I'm going to go to memory recall 1. Almost everything is set. I might make some small adjustments, get the shot. Maybe I flip over and want to do some slow motion, change the memory recall 2, might change the exposure and make it right, but most everything is set. So I don't have to go back, change shutter speeds, change frame rates, change codecs, everything is good to go. For this one, I have my auto white balance here not set to 5600 Kelvin, so auto white balance is just set to auto because I don't know the scene for slow motion shots typically. And then if I scroll down through here, I'm going to show you the most important pieces. A lot of these are very similar to how I had it for the talking head style shot. The one big difference besides the shutter speeds and being in 60p as opposed to 24 for slow motion is on my autofocus. I have these turned up. We just looked at it. My autofocus transition speed and subject shift sensitivity, I had those a lot lower for a talking head style shot, but for slow motion I have those cranked up because I want the autofocus to keep up with what is typically a fast moving subject for something like slow motion. And one other important thing that I have for my slow motion is steady shot. You see it set to dynamic active. That's the most stable the camera is going to get for something that's handheld that I'm going to be using for slow motion. I'm likely going to be hand holding this, so I want to have that auto set and defaulted. As soon as I click over to memory recall 2, I want these things set up. My memory recall number 3 is my vlog style shot. It's very similar to the settings of memory recall 1, but there's a few small things that I changed, and being able just to scan through these and hit what I want to hit for the style of shot just saves me a lot of time. So on memory recall 3, again, a lot is very similar to recall 1. I'm in 1/50 on my shutter because my frame rate is at 24p in 4K XAVCS 4K. I'm in 422 10-bit color. One of the major differences between this one and number 1. Number 1, I had my white balance at 5600 because I typically have a 5600 Kelvin key light. For a vlog style shot, it's an auto white balance because I'm not going to know the white balance of the scene. Everything else is going to be exactly the same. The only other major difference that I have here is actually going to be in the stabilization, where I have this set to dynamic active, whereas number 1 I had just set to standard. Dynamic active is going to crop in more but give me a lot more stability, kind of like my slow motion shot. And if I'm hand holding the camera on a vlog, I want that to be as stable as possible. And the only other major difference in my memory recall 3 as opposed to 1 is my audio record level. I have this set to 4. With the vlog mic that I use, I found that to be the best level. You might have to play around with that, but I found that to be the best level. And again, back on memory recall 1, I had that cranked to like 19 because I want the camera audio to pick up the audio so I can use that to sync my audio in post from something like a mic. But for memory recall 3, I set the audio record level to be something that I know is going to be good for the microphone that I'm using. Props to you if you made it through memory recall settings. Let's get into the other stuff. It's going to be a little bit easier, but still just as important. The product showcase feature is really interesting. When you have this turned on and you hold a product up in front of your face like you're doing a review, it'll focus on the product. Then when you put it back down, it goes back onto the subject of the actual shot. If you don't have this turned on, that doesn't work so well. The camera will stay autofocus locked on the face. You'll hold the product up in front of your face, it'll be all blurred out because back here will be in focus. But kind of a cool feature to have that product showcase in this camera. I had to widen the angle because this light was blurring out that touch sidebar. Yeah, you can see my mic, so bad form, we'll get over it. Anyways, that touch sidebar function of microphone directivity is cool. As you tap it, it'll cycle through all of its options, and what that's doing, the microphone on top of the camera, you can choose if you want your audio to be picked up directly in front of the camera or behind the camera or all directions, or auto where it'll pick and choose for you. And pretty cool in this camera, we also have the ability to tap on white balance, and we can scroll through different white balance settings, and we can also go over to ISO, change our ISO direct from that touch bar, and then we also have the same thing for shutter speed and for aperture to change all those settings with just tapping. I do still map a few of those things to hard buttons, but it is cool to have that on the touchscreen. Next, let's talk about the custom buttons. And this is where we really start to customize the camera. I like to take every single function and setting in the camera, the ones that I'm gonna use the absolute most frequently in a video shoot, and map them to certain buttons on the back of the camera. Let me take you through exactly how I have this thing customized. The first thing with custom buttons is you have to actually understand, like, well, how do I actually change what the buttons are? And here's how you do that. I'm at the bottom here on the briefcase. I'm gonna scroll to the right under dial customize. I'm gonna go to custom key dial settings. I'm on the video icon. We're talking about video today. If I scroll to the right, I'm met with this menu. Yours is gonna look different than mine. Mine's already mapped out. We're gonna talk through each of these, but if you scroll to the right, and you can see by that orange highlighter there on the camera on the right side of the screen what button this one is reflective of, and you can kind of scroll through and see the changes there. All you have to do is you have to click on it, and then you can scroll through the entire menu, and you can map this to whatever you want to map it to. Here's how I have mine mapped out. The first one I have here is auto white balance lock toggle. How that works is I'm gonna go back up in the camera here a little bit, and you can see in the bottom right when I hit that button that we just mapped, that AWBL is turning on. Your camera has to be in auto white balance for this to work, but once it's in auto white balance, why this is so valuable is you let the camera get the scene. Let it get the white balance of the scene, so give it a few seconds, and then if you tap that, the white balance will not change until you tap it again to unlock it, but it won't change. That's really valuable so that your colors don't shift around. A lot of times when you leave your camera in auto white balance, you might notice some color shifting happening. Maybe somebody walks by with a different color shirt, maybe the sun comes down or goes up a little bit, and the white balance is ultimately gonna just like change around. If you don't want that to happen, you can lock it off and keep your colors consistent. Number two, so the bottom right down there, the trash can button, I have custom mapped this to focus standard. Again, how to do that, if you click on it, you can scroll around, you can see where these live. Focus standard. This is my favorite button that I've mapped in this camera. So a lot of times if you want to get the camera, I'll hit it right now, focus standard allows me to move my focus point around. So your camera does need to be, if it's in wide for example, this isn't going to do anything. Your camera does need to be in either zone or expand spot. The problem with the camera is that as soon as you like select, for example, like I just did in the middle, where you want your focal point to be on this expand spot, for example, there's no way to move it unless you go back into focus area, you click it, and then you can move it around. What's nice, we map that trash can to focus standard. As soon as I hit that, I can just move this focal point around, which is pretty cool. Saves some time, just saves a step. I found that to be a big one. And the third one that I changed, this center button here, is zebra display select. So I'm gonna back out and let's take a look at what's happening here. I'm just tapping this on and off. You're not seeing much happen up on the screen here because I have it just completely blacked out. But when that is on, your zebras are gonna show up on the values that you tell them to show up to. I'll talk a lot more about this at the very end of the video, but just know I have that map for zebras on and off. I use that all of the time. And my fourth custom button is zebra level, so pushing left on the actual dial. Here's what that looks like. When you push left, you can choose the actual level of zebras that you want to be using. If that's confusing to you, I encourage you to make it to the end of this video. I do talk deeper about that. It's a really important thing if you want to nail your exposure. And my fifth custom button is ISO. So pushing right on the dial allows me to bring up my ISO values and scroll through there. Those of us who've shot video in the past or even photo, we know the value of quick access to ISO. We use that one all the time. And my last one is focus area. So pushing down on the dial brings up focus area, which is going to be choosing between what type of focus I want the camera to be using. So if I want zone, the camera's only going to focus within that white box. I can change that really quickly. Maybe I know something a little bit more precise. I want to focus exactly right there. I'd use an expand spot. Or wide, if you want the camera to use the entire frame to find its focal point, I'll use wide for like touch tracking, so I can just tap anywhere on the screen and it's gonna focus there. And on top of the camera, we have two options here. My first one, I have audio record level. This second one is the big red button up top. Yours is set to movie shooting. I didn't change that out of box, but I did change this one. Number one, audio record level. So how that looks in camera, as soon as I tap that C1 button, I bring up my audio levels and I can just quickly change how much gain I want the camera picking up for the audio. A fast way to get your audio just with one button there. And if you have a lens that has a custom button on it, you can customize that here. I don't use that very often, and I left my dial wheels set exactly how they came out of camera. where my top dial here is changing my f-stop, and if I spin the wheel, that's gonna be changing my shutter speed. And now let's move into the function menu and start to customize that out a little bit. If our custom buttons are the things that we're gonna be using the most frequently, think of the function menu as like a catch-all for the items and the functions in the camera that didn't quite make the list in the priority list of the things that we're gonna customize, but are still really important and ones that we're gonna access pretty often. Hope you're taking notes. And if you're out there wondering, like, why can't he just make it easy on us? Can't he put together some kind of guide? Yeah, I've got your back. Free guide, there's a link down below of every single setting and how I put it together on the camera. Every single setting we reviewed up to this point and everything that we're about to review. So if you want a cheat sheet, check that out again, link below. All right, let's actually customize our function menu. How to do that is the briefcase down here at the bottom. We're gonna go to number 3 this time, and we're gonna scroll down to FN function menu settings. Scroll to the right. This top section, this is for when our camera's in photo mode. You can customize them differently for photo or video. We're talking about video today. So down here in the video function menu, yours is gonna look a little bit different. All you have to do to customize it and put a new item in there, click on where you want to put it, and then you can scroll through the menu and you can choose what you need, similar to how we did it with the custom buttons. And to get into the function menu, just tap the FN button on the back of the camera and you're going to be met with this. The first item in the upper left here in my custom function menu is select LUT. LUT, L-U-T, just means lookup table, and it's a way to take, if you're shooting in log, it's a file you can apply to your footage, typically in post, that's going to convert it over to standard Rec. 709 color. A LUT can also be more of a stylized look where you're adding a style to your clips. These are things that are usually done in post, but it's pretty cool in the ZVE1. We can actually upload custom LUTs into the camera, and then we can apply those to our footage and see how they look before we even hit record. I'm actually planning on doing a video about the workflows of how to upload LUTs into the ZVE1, what are the best ones to use for different styles of footage, and what the overall just best workflows are in using them. So if you're interested in a deep dive in that, let me know in the comments down below, and make sure you subscribe while you're down there so you don't miss that video. And next I have soft skin effect. I usually have this off, not something I love. Some people like how they look with the soft skin effect, so we can turn that on. And I don't like how medium and high look. I think it's a little bit too much. Preference, however you want to do it, you do your thing. If anything, I have that set to low, but some people, if I'm shooting, they tend to like how that looks, so I'll have that as a quick access. These three, pretty frequently used. File format, clicking on that, this gives us the ability to choose between our different codecs in the camera, XAVC-S, XAVC-SI, and XAVC-HS, all those being the 4K options. I use XAVC-S. I've done other videos that deep dive into what each of these are, but XAVC-S 4K is what I like to use. Next, we can choose our frame rate. These might be different if you're, for example, if you bring this to 1080p, and then this might give you the ability to go up to 120. I'm waiting for this camera. Very soon we're gonna get 4K 120. It's gonna be exciting. And then you can choose your record settings. So this is technically your color bit depth, and I'm shooting with this camera. It has 10 bits, so I'm always gonna be shooting in 10 bit. Picture profile is my next one. I've been using the LUT feature in this camera a lot more than picture profile, but when I wanna choose picture profiles, I have that set over there. That's grayed out because I have the LUTs turned on. If LUTs aren't turned on, then you can have that not grayed out, and it's a fast way to get to your picture profiles. Framing tracking speed, when you're framing stabilizer, another item I have here, when that is set to center, you can then change your framing tracking speed. This is the one that when you turn it on, the camera is going to center track you, and it will crop and kind of move around if you're moving around the frame. That's when that's turned on. And then the actual tracking speed, how fast it's actually following the action, is how you would set it here, and you can scroll through those different settings. Steady shot is something that we use pretty frequently depending upon the shot. Dynamic active is the camera's best stability, but it also punches in and gives the biggest crop penalty. Active, much less crop, still a very stabilized shot. These are all like typically for handheld style stuff. And then standard or off is when you're locked off on like a tripod and they don't have any crop at all. Autofocus transition speeds. It talks about this in memory recall settings, but here's where you can change your actual autofocus transition speed, as well as your autofocus subject shift sensitivity. You can change those sensitivities. And then lastly, marker display. Not super important, but I use it pretty frequently to know where center frame is. You can toggle your markers on or off when you have that there. what that is, I'm on tab 3 here, all the way at item 11 for marker display. You can play around with these and it'll just put different lines and show you where center frame is, different lines on the actual screen. It doesn't record it into the footage, it's just for reference. But when you have some of these turned on, again, play with it. When you turn marker display on, it puts those in place. If you turn it off, it takes all the ones away that you have engaged. But I have that in my function menu for quick access because it is something that I use pretty frequently, especially for YouTube stuff. If you're liking the video so far and you want to see more videos just like this on my channel, let me know by giving it a tap on the thumbs up. I actually look at that and it tells me what kind of videos are working well for all of you. And as we move into this last section, the My Menu system, we can actually custom map and make our own menu in the camera, so we don't have to navigate and go through every single tab when we want to find something that we use frequently. So if you look at the custom buttons is the stuff that we're going to use the most frequently, and the function menu is the next most prioritized list of things that we're going to use. The last one is the My Menu system. We're not going to use them all the time, but we want to know where they are and be able to get to them very quickly, so we don't have to go through that entire menu system. Let's customize the My Menu. So I'm at the very top here, the star. I'm going to scroll to the right, go down to My Menu setting, go to add item. Let's say you're going to actually add items into your menu. You're going to go through here, you're going to go through the entire menu and click the things that you want to actually put into your menu and where you want to put them. So you can go through that interface and do that, but here's exactly how I have mine set up. So between my custom buttons, the touchscreen, and the function menu and My Menu, I actually don't even go into the rest of the menu to use this camera anymore. I have everything set up the way I want it to be. So My Menu is set up like this. The first thing I have is HDMI info display. Unless you're screen sharing to an external monitor, you're probably not going to need this. Maybe that's specialty for me. Next is smartphone connection, which allows us to connect our smartphone to use that for remote shooting or as a monitor if the camera's across the room or something. So one I use pretty frequently. USB streaming, if I want to use the camera as a webcam, I set it up through there. This is formatting my SD card, so that's how I erase my SD card. My auto frame settings, so we had that in the function menu earlier, but there's a little bit more depth that we can do with the auto framing there, so I want to make sure I have access to that when I need it. My custom key settings for video and for photo, that's how we actually set up our custom buttons. That's just a fast way to get there, something that you might tweak over time. You might make small tweaks here and there, so being able to access the actual menu of that and go in there pretty quickly is good to have in your My Menu if you want to go back into this and make small tweaks quickly. And moving into My Menu page 2, the more items you can get more pages. I just have 2 to keep it simple. My Menu 2, manage user LUTs. This is going deep into some of those user LUTs we were talking about earlier, how to import them, maybe deleting them. So I'm going to be playing with that pretty often, so I have that shortcutted. Log shoot settings, this is actually turning those LUTs on. Look for a future video on going deeper there. And AF with shutter is more of a photo setting for me, so we'll skip through that today, being video centric. Function menu settings, that's how we customize our function menu. Monitor brightness I actually use pretty frequently. This monitor is not great. I typically always have it in sunny weather, but if my battery's getting low, I might switch that over to non-sunny weather, something like manual or something just not quite sucking up as much power. On that power note though, airplane mode, I typically have this turned on. Airplane mode's gonna essentially take all the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth out of the camera, and you're gonna save a little bit more battery when that's turned on. However, why I have that shortcutted in My Menu, because when you go to smartphone connection, like you can see that grayed out, you can't be in airplane mode. So those two typically are settings we change simultaneously. And then camera set memory is my last one, and that's what we use to actually save settings into the memory recall. So you might tweak those a little bit over time, having quick access right there. This little camera has been extremely impressive. I have a playlist put together on the channel specifically dedicated to the ZV-E1. I'm still adding to it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any future videos. And earlier we talked about how to map zebras to certain buttons on the camera, and I mentioned that that's my favorite way to nail exposure. Make sure you check out this video. About halfway through, I share all of my details on how I'm using zebras to get really good exposure. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. See ya.